Continuing reading, her children gathered around her, all 7, and the youngest sat on her lap. Others took the floor or the couch close to her. She told how her husband was standing at this point on the floor, just inside the living room, when he heard marching in the street. He went to the window and looked out. She explained that the bullet crashed through the window, striking him in the head. An Israeli soldier shot him without cause, the translator said. I questioned her. Was he threatening them, or was he engaged in any terrorist activity? No, she shook her head. He was a good man and was our only provider for the family. She then explained how the blood was all over the ceiling and the walls, and how the Israelis came and cleaned it up immediately, and that was the end of her husband. She wept, and there were tears in her eyes of her younger children. The older ones had only hard eyes, and I could see the emergency of the next generation who would be called terrorists. This is how we create terrorism. We wanted to visit more homes, but we were stopped by the Israeli army patrol and ushered out of the concentration camp. It was only the fact we were an official registered peace commission from the foreign land that saved us from arrest. The children also helped. They continued to flock around us, and we distributed candy, balloons, and what trinkets as we had in our possessions at the time. The walls of the concentration camps are a little less than 30 feet high, made from wire mesh and aluminum roofing. It is impossible to break through. The people in the camps have lived there all their lives. Why? Because someone decided they were subhuman. If her story was true, I wondered what kind of human shot that father. Then we began our visit of the hospitals. All of the hospitals in Israel, only 2 are for the 2.5 million Palestinians who still live in Israel. These 2 hospitals are administered by the United Nations doctors because of Palestinian doctors and teachers are Israeli prisoners. I remember that my Faraj brothers learned English in prison, where it was taught underground against the directives of their captors. We were met by the head doctor, who looked exhausted. Sorry, she explained, I was up most of the night. I was filing another protest to the United Nations now. Why? She asked. The Israeli soldiers tear-gassed the maternity ward last night. The rooms were filled with expectant mothers. Our mouths must have dropped open because, she explained, the entire Israeli policy is to drive every Palestinian out of the country. 2.5 million have already fled. 110,000 women and children have been killed. They are serious about it. I didn't believe it, so she called 2 more United Nations doctors, and they began to show us the X-ray films of the children with bullets in their heads, backs, and bodies, put there by Israeli soldiers, they affirmed. I asked to see the bullets. One doctor went over to the drawer and opened it. It was filled with bullet heads. Most were little bigger than the size of a .22 caliber bullet. Others were larger, and few were made of rubber. These Israelis claimed they were using only rubber bullets, he explained. Let me show you what a rubber bullet will do to a body of a child. We watched as they showed more and more x-rays of children. The children were just as dead from the rubber bullet, he explained, but there are only a few rubber bullets. Most are real, but all are deadly. I would have resigned a long time ago, said the clinic director, but the last 7 of the UN doctors had all resigned in protest. I figured I could do no good remaining as a doctor, even though I am quite powerless to help when the hospitals are attacked by the Israeli soldiers. With her permission, I kept 2 of the bullets, and I still have them. They are my reminders. We returned to our little blue and white bus. Once again, they dropped us off in the old city of Jerusalem. I took the group to meet my Faraj brothers. We bought a few things, went to the hotel, had a good dinner, and sat around discussing the situation as we saw in Israel. At 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed. I heard a knock at my door. It was my Faraj brothers. Faraj, the older one said, come with us. Where? I asked. Come. We have no time to explain, he said. I put my clothes back on, and I followed. An old and very small car waited just outside the hotel parking lot. It was dirty and rusted away, but it ran. I folded myself into it, and we drove without lights, crouched over in the car through the city into one of its blackout areas. Here in the Arab sectors, the Israelis allow minimum electricity, and even though their own Israeli suburbs are well lit, the Arab sector remain perpetually dark. In this sector, the homes there were dirt roads, evidently no sewage systems because it ran down the gutters, and little electrical power. We entered the home with some lights. It was a fairly nice home by Arab standards, and there we were introduced to an Arab mother and her 8 children. She was obviously nervous, and the children sat in absolute silence. Then a young man of 18 entered. He had a crippled leg, so he walked on the side of his ankle and had a pronounced limp. Both his hands and arms were also crippled. His arms were bent at the elbow, so his hands could not dangle. Other than his handicaps, he was robust and appeared like any high school graduate who might have played football in an American school. There was, however, no laughter in this young man. We were introduced, and he nodded his head to each of us. He selected a chair and seated himself. His mother and his brothers and sisters all sat watching. Then the youngest Faraj brother took his chair and sat right in front of this young man. He put his hands on each side of the young man's head and pulled his face within 2 inches of his own and shouted, "Hamad, pay attention," and he began to track. It was tracking unlike anything I had ever seen. No sooner had he started, and it was all in Arabic. Then he stopped, looked at me, and said in English, "Okay, Faraj, now what do I do?" "About what?" I asked. "Well, he was tortured by the Israelis, and he is in such great hate. All he wants to do is kill Israelis. What do we do?" he explained. "Take him back to the time his hate began," I suggested. "Okay," he said, and he put his face back in the young man's. Then some more speech in Arabic, and then, "Faraj, he says it started when they killed his father for no reason." "What happened after that?" I asked. There was more speaking in Arabic. Then he turned back to me. "He says he started resisting, and they caught him. They left him for 5 days and nights in a space too small to stand up or sit down. It was in a desert. They broke his legs, both his arms, his hands, and his fingers. At that point, the young man showed how all his fingers could be turned completely back, the joints still broken away." "How did he feel?" I asked. More Arabic talk, and then, "He was consumed by hate." "What color is this hate?" I asked, and they worked at it a while. The young man withdrew into himself, and then more talks in Arabic. "It is a great darkness, blackness," explained my Faraj brother. Suddenly there was a great commotion in front of the house. Cars drove up, men got out, slammed doors, and shouted to one another as they approached the house. The mother and children began very frightened. The commotion stopped the tracking process, and my Faraj brothers went to answer the door. Mohammed also got up and motioned me to stay put. The 3 men left the room. What followed was a great amount of shouting and angry words. The mother left and joined the confrontation. Finally, after about half an hour, the band of men left. The 3 men and the mother came back up inside. "We had to explain what we are doing," said the older Faraj brother. "Everything is okay. Let's continue." I realized what risk they were taking, but once again we faced the young man's hate. "It is black," I asked. "How big is the blackness?" He turned to Muhammad and said some more Arabic words. "He cannot see how big it is. His entire world is consumed by the blackness," he replied. "See if he can travel through the blackness to its outer edge." "How far does it go?" I asked. I realized that holodynes can sometimes expand outward to great depths. "It goes to the edge of the galaxy," the younger brother replied. "Good. It is the size of the galaxy." Explained to him that it indicates the size of his love. Then he asked to put a field of love around this hate. "His love is bigger than his hate. Can he do it?" I asked. He will try. More Arab talk, and the young man nodded an affirmative. He is trying. Ask him to talk directly to the blackness. Ask what it wants. They talked for a few minutes. It wants to kill all Israelis, he said seriously. What else does it want? More talk, and then, it wants to kill everyone who supports Israelis. What else? I wanted him to continue until he reached the epicenter of the Holodynamics. It wants to kill all life, I was told. And what would it have if it killed all life? Into the eyes of my Faraj brother came an instant recognition. It passed between us in a twinkle of an eye, and I knew he knew. With genuine confidence, he began to talk rapidly to Mohammed. Suddenly, the young man said, "Oh! Oh! Oh!" I knew he had broke through. He got it. His family got it at the same time. His mother and his brothers and sisters began to weep. They were so relieved. They knew he knew. He sat for a moment in silence. From him came the most beautiful radiance. He spoke rapidly to my Faraj brothers, who then turned to me and said, "It is the love of God." "Please explain to me what is happening," I asked, wanting to put words around it, and even though I knew. "He says his hate is to teach him to love without condition. He says his enemies have taught him unconditional love. He sees now that all his life has been to teach him love." Then with a glimpse, he asked, "Is it the river of life?" "Yes." "Ask him," I suggested, but before he could say anything, the young man got up and gave me the most gentle embrace. He held me for some time, and then, as he let me go, I asked, "Mohammed, what about your hands and feet? Do you want these healed? So you can heal crippled hands with this holodynamic treatment." As my Faraj brother translated, Mohammed looked at me and said, "Ah, Faraj, I do not want to have my hands or foot healed. These are my witness to all the world of my unconditional love for my enemies." I do not know how to describe that moment. It was profound, to say the least. Then his family swarmed around him, hugging and kissing him, and his mother cried her gratitude and took my hands and kissed them. She finished the process. The galaxy of darkness was consumed by the river of life. Peace settled upon the home. They offered food and drink, and we stayed a while, but the night was almost gone. In early morning hours, I crawled into bed. Another early breakfast, and off we went into the little blue bus. We visited a few more churches, but we also visited heads of organizations. One organization was focused on helping refugees who came from Russia. My friend and former translator, when I was in Russia, was one of them. She and her husband were immigrating to Israel the year before, and we were able to find each other. They had spent their lives savings getting to Israel, but now they have very little. She never complained. People who were once fairly well off in the homeland are now getting their furniture from the side of the street where wealthy Israelis leave their leftovers and throw away items. In Russia we had some comfort. Here we have nothing, she explained. There was no malice in her. She devoted to Judaism. A life here is much tougher than in Russia, she went on. The videotapes they showed us were not what we found here. It is impossible to get work. They do not give us the compensation they promise. Many people were without means and without assistance. They were starving. We are seeking to help. What could I say? At noon, there was a demonstration by the women in black. We went to see it. These Israeli women protest the war and the inhumane treatment of native Israelis and the name they gave to Palestinians. These women dressed in black and stand in the main intersection of the city. People knew what it means to be dressed in black. They are in mourning for death as the honor of Israeli, and they are determined to make their point to the public. I was glad to be among them. We shared a common determination to stand for the cure of all collective pathology. Then we visited more churches, were dropped off in the old city again to visit the shops, and then went back to the hotel. It became routine, and every night at 11 p.m. sharp, my Faraj brothers would pick me up, and off we'd go to visit some more terrorists. On the third night, Benio, a 70-year-old woman who had become known as more aware than average bear, spotted me going to the hotel. "Hey, Vernon," she called. "Where are you going?" I stopped to talk with her just to quiet her down. "I see you go out every night. You got a girl on the side?" she chuckled. "No girl," I replied and laughed. "Then where are you going? I see you going out. What kind of night life is this?" She was a very curious being. "If you promise not to tell, I'll tell you," I replied with some degree of concern. I'll have to continue on another tape.